Hello everyone. This is a presentation from the organization Nijiiro Gakkou, a nonprofit supporting aromantic and asexual people in Japan, in collaboration with ASPEC Japan, an English language group of asexuals. We'll be giving a presentation about some of the interesting points about asexuality and sexuality in Japan, and also go over some of the data collected in the first large-scale survey of asexuals in Japan in 2020. First, a very brief history of asexuality and Nijiiro Gakkou in Japan. The term first started to be recognized in Japan around 2002, which may be thanks to greater conversation about it in English-speaking countries following the start of the Asexual Visibility and Education Network, or AVEN, in 2001. There were various individual efforts to increase recognition and visibility in Japan, primarily by Nijiiro Gakkou's founder, Haruka. In 2016, Nijiiro Gakkou, which literally means Rainbow School, was founded. This is a registered NPO that aims to raise awareness of asexuality, aromanticism, non-binary identities, and so on. Nijiiro Gakkou produces educational information, has booths at LGBTQ-related events, such as Tokyo Rainbow Pride, and hosts discussion sessions and group mixer events for asexual and aromantic people. They also started the Ace Week Japan and Aro Week Japan events to help connect aro and ace people. Next, some basic information. Contrary to a lot of English-speaking countries, discussion of asexuality in Japan has focused on romantic attraction more than sexual behavior, sexual attraction, or sexual orientation identity. Because of this focus on romantic attraction, some terminology can be different in Japan. For example, asexual in Japan, or asexual, can mean someone who doesn't experience sexual or romantic attraction, which would be called a romantic asexual in many English-speaking countries. Non-sexual, or non-sexual, on the other hand, is someone who experiences romantic attraction but not sexual attraction, or a romantic asexual. However, because the meaning of asexual in English-speaking countries is more broad, some Japanese people use that meaning of asexual, only meaning someone who doesn't experience sexual attraction also. The use of these terms is still in flux, so the meaning of asexual would depend a lot on who is using it and which definition they use. Public awareness has been increasing for asexuality in recent years, with a few news articles about a few famous people discussing asexuality and so on. There is sometimes confusion among the public about the term soushokuge. This means literally herbivore type and refers to people, particularly cis heterosexual men, who either choose abstinence or are not very good at relationships. Soushokuge or soushokudansei weren't coined until 2006, but they have been discussed a lot, particularly in relation to the hot-button issue of the low birth rate in Japan, meaning the terms have more general recognition in society than asexuality. Soushokuge is more related to behavior and choices rather than attraction, so it isn't the same as asexuality. Although it's possible some people who are called soushokuge or identify that way have similar feelings to people who identify as asexual, but are unaware of the term. Next, we will present some of the data from the ACE-ARO Survey 2020. Some basic information about the survey. It was conducted from June 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2020 in a Google Form survey. Participants were required to be on the asexual and/or aromantic spectrum, including those that were questioning, have the ability to read and write Japanese, and be over 13 years old. There were no limitations placed on location or citizenship, so Japanese speakers outside Japan and non-Japanese citizens could respond. The survey received 1,685 valid responses, making it the largest survey of asexuality in Japan to date. It was mainly promoted through organization websites such as Nijiiro Gakkou, Twitter, and Line groups. Line is a popular chatting app in Japan similar to WhatsApp. The survey also sometimes compares data with the 2016 ACE Community Survey, which was an English-language international survey of asexual and aromantic people. Most of the questions were optional except for a few about basic demographic information. First, just a few basic demographic comparisons. For age demographics, the median age of respondents to the ACE Survey 2020 was 25, while the ACE Community Survey 2016 was 21. The age range of the ACE Survey was 13 to 63, while the ACE Community Survey was 13 to 75. For gender demographics, the ACE survey respondents were around 68% women, 6% men, and 26% other, while the ACE community respondents were around 63% women, 11% men, and 26% other. The other category can include non-binary respondents, but also respondents who prefer not to give their gender. In the ACE survey, around 62% of respondents were cisgender women. Around 32% of respondents were not cisgender. Around 16% of respondents identified as X-gender or non-binary. We can conclude from this data that the demographics of the two surveys are relatively similar despite differences in language and location. Just to note that this is a selection of some of the results, not an exhaustive overview. If you would like to see the original data, it can be found at the listed URL, although please note it's currently only available in Japanese. Also note that some of the questions and results are related to sexual desire and/or activity. First, the basic identity data on romantic orientation. You can see the romantic orientations of respondents, with most respondents being aromantic, followed by romantic, then demi-romantic, questioning, and so on. For comparison, here are the results for romantic orientation from the ACE Community Survey. As you can see, the proportion of aromantic respondents is much lower. It's possible that because the survey was of asexual people, which in Japan might be understood as meaning aromantic asexual, that the amount of aromantic respondents was disproportionately higher compared to other identities. Compared to the ACE Community Survey, very few asexuals in Japan seem to identify as biromantic, panromantic, homoromantic, or heteroromantic. On the other hand, significantly fewer people identify as questioning. This is a breakdown of respondents by sexual orientation. The majority of respondents, 66%, identified as asexual, with smaller percentages identifying as sexual, gray sexual, demisexual, and so on. For comparison, here's the results from the ACE Community Survey. The proportion of those identifying as asexual, gray sexual, and demisexual are similar, but the proportion of people identifying as questioning in the ACE survey included in Other is significantly less in the ACE survey. Next, here's the data on the main romantic and sexual orientation combinations. Aromantic asexual is the highest, followed by romantic asexual, and then aromantic sexual, that is, not asexual but aromantic. Once again, the proportion of aromantic respondents is quite high. This slide is regarding the term non-sexual mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, which is used in Japan sometimes as a term for romantic asexual. As you can see, the majority of romantic asexuals use the term non-sexual, although a few don't use it or haven't heard of it. The next question is about desire for relationships depending on romantic orientation. The majority of aromantic respondents, about 90%, had no or little desire for a relationship, while the majority of romantic respondents had some desire for a relationship. Other orientations, such as demi-romantic, gray romantic, and so on, tended toward not desiring a relationship. This next question was about sexual desire, libido. Around 65% of those identifying as asexual said they thought they experienced sexual desire to some extent, and the amount was higher for other orientations. This shows that identification with asexuality in Japan is not necessarily linked to sexual desire in general. This graph shows that asexual respondents mostly had not had thoughts about sexual activity with others, while sexual people mostly had. Other orientations fell somewhere in the middle. Similar to the previous results, asexual people generally haven't experienced sexual attraction, although more people replied that they had experienced sexual attraction compared to having thoughts about sexual activity. This question is related to touch aversion. While a few people had aversions to even very casual touches, such as shaking hands, many people had no repulsion to touch, and many had no repulsion to non-sexual touch, such as hugging or holding hands. Despite the image that may be present, being asexual doesn't necessarily mean being adverse to touch, even potentially sexual touch, such as kissing. Speaking about the desire for a partner or partners versus a close group or no partner at all, in this case, we're considering partner as a special separate relationship with one or more person, and a close group being a close-knit support group or friend group. The number of people wanting a partner or partners was quite high, meaning that many aro or ace people still desire to have a special particular relationship with someone. However, 25% of people didn't have any desire for either a partner or a close-knit group. This graph is related to feelings of anxiety or uneasiness from living as an aromantic or asexual person, and around half of asexuals have felt some amount of anxiety or uneasiness from this situation. Around 50% of people also said they experienced some difficulty or hardship from being aromantic or asexual. Based on other survey data, the main sources of difficulties were difficulties in relationships and trouble with unpleasant questions or remarks. Around 27% of respondents said they had difficulty in relationships due to their asexuality, and around 26% had experienced unpleasant remarks or questions. This section also had an area to leave a comment. Here are a selection of some of them. Many of these difficulties relate to unpleasant questions or comments, or a negative social perception of asexuality. Thank you very much for allowing us to make this presentation. A big thank you to PanACEa for hosting this event and for inviting us to participate. If you have any questions, you can contact Nijiiro Gakkou directly at info@nijiko.com or on Twitter at Niji_Cole, or you can contact the English language ASPEC Japan group. The point of contact is tedra at elliot.tedra@gmail.com. Once again, the complete survey and results can be found at the following URL.